See, unlike America would have us believe, the greatest problem confronting this country today is not pollution and bad breath. It's black people. It's black people. See, that's just one of the big lies that America tells you and that you go for because you chumps. You go for it. One of the lies that we tell ourselves is that we are making progress. But here his chair is empty. We're not making progress. We tend to equate progress with concessions. We can no longer make that mistake. You see, when they gave us that nigger astronaut, you say we were making progress, but I told you they were going to lose him in space. He didn't get that far. They gave you Thurgood Marshall, and you said we were making progress. Thurgood Marshall is a Tom of the highest order. Anybody who sits before James O. Eastland, a camel breath, Peckerwood, nasty honky from Mississippi, and let James O. Eastland subject him to the type of questioning that he did, he's a strange breed of man. You put Adam Powell in office and you couldn't keep him. What you think they're going to do with Thurgood Marshall when they get tired of him? They gave you Walter Washington of Washington, D.C., and you said we were making progress. That's not progress. See, it's no in-between. You're either free or you're a slave. There's no such thing as second-class citizenship. That's like telling me you can be a little bit pregnant. The only politics in this country that's relevant to black people today is the politics of revolution. None other. There is no difference between the Democratic and Republican Party. The similarities are greater than the differences of those parties. What's the difference between Lyncham Johnson and Goldwater? None. But a lot of you running around talking about you Democrats, and the Democrats got you in the biggest trick going. They tell you it ain't our fault, it's the Dixiecrats. There's no such thing as a Dixiecrat. The only difference between George Wallace and Lyndon Johnson is one of them's wife got cancer. That's the only difference.
Salaam Alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies.
So this is the reality of our history. And in saying that, we have endured a lot of trauma because our slavery was longer than the people that I just mentioned, like the people that you find in white cargo, like the Germans, the Irish, the Scots, and then I mentioned the Native Americans. Africans, for the most part, they were slaves much longer. This is a fact when it comes to the Americas. So the trauma is there. The trauma endured. So this is what we have to contend with, and these are things that we as a people have to deal with. The trauma that our ancestors went through, and then the trauma that they passed down. But what I'm getting at is that this trauma has caused many abnormalities with the African American, such as what we're discussing, the psychology of self-hatred, self-defeat. Others say the issue of post-traumatic slave syndrome. And this is not to pathologize a whole race, no, but it's an attempt to explain some of the problems that we see with the African Americans today. So the African Americans, for the most part, they have not really been able to acquire wealth. They have not been able to access quality education. And these are things that Dr. Amos Wilson mentioned. You have to work on and establish. You have to work on these things and establish them for the betterment and the future of the next generation. Have to be concerned with the next generation. We can't look at the past and complain about what our ancestors went through. and what we're still going through. And I mentioned this many times, this is ruminating. We do not want to ruminate. No, you want to learn from the past, do a comparison contrast with the present, and then come up with some formulas and theories of your own on how you can move forward. In conjunction with bringing your people on board, you have to be in the trenches. Just like the prophets that I just mentioned in the beginning, they were in the trenches. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to take time with the children. We have to take time with the children. We can go over the history of what our people went through and teach that to our children, but you have to use that in a way to navigate. We can't be like those black nationalists or those, some people call them Imhoteps. Look at the greatness of Egypt. Look at the pyramids. And then, so Africans built the pyramids. Now what? Africa's still poor, despite having the most abundance of natural resources. The African Americans are still behind with regards to the racial wealth gap. In conjunction to, they suffer the most medical problems as a result of the oppression. You have to teach this to your children and show them the effects, but then you also have to push them to do better, and you have to establish things for them. And there's nothing wrong with you as an African American or a foundational Black American, indigenous, whatever you want to call yourself. There's nothing wrong with you ensuring the future of your people in the lands that you dwell in. It's nothing wrong. And we've already proven that in the very beginning with the prophets. That's why I started off talking about them, because this is the spirit that I'm coming from, utilizing the prophets as the examples that we must take in making sure or ensuring the survival of our people here in the United States, whether Muslim or Catholic. Now, of course, as Muslims, the number one thing is to call them to what? Tawheed. No doubt about that. But you also have to do those other things, being neighborly. You also have to make sure that their children are okay when the children are outside playing. You have to be concerned with the police brutality that goes on. You also have to be concerned with the black on black crime. So there's nothing wrong with that. So we move on to Dr. Amos Wilson. He says, still on page 5, do not let some person arguing about reverse racism turn you away from the use of your own money for our benefit. You have the right to use your own money to your own benefit and for the advancement of black people. Black nationalism as an ideology has built into it the use of our own resources for ourselves. And this is a reality. And from that, we can also say that other groups are doing it, have done it, and are doing it. And no one says to them reverse racism. No, they are ensuring the survival of their group. So they establish businesses and they pass those businesses down to their children, which brings me to another point. And Dr. Amos Wilson, he delves into that. And that is building for the next generation. You have to build for the next generation. As he mentioned in the very beginning, you have to be concerned about the children. If you're not concerned about the children and you just focus on your hurt and your ego, then you'll leave the children worse off than you. And this is the case. This is the reality with our people here in the United States of America. This is the reality. And we're paying the price. Not just non-Muslims, but Muslims as well.
So you talked about Biden, and you feel that the Biden presidency isn't really delivering the way we wanted to, the way Black folks need. And also last night, I don't know if you know that or not. You and I talked about it briefly. I remind you, on Wednesday nights we're reading this book. We're reading Black Labor, White Wealth in our book club, and yeah, we were going through. We're still in the early stages of the book, and one of the things that was brought up was something that you just mentioned, that there is a lack of understanding amongst prominent Black people, that Black people haven't been making progress, particularly in the areas of economics and education, things like that. Or about 100,000 Black kids graduate from high school every year without even being able to read on grade level. Wealth-wise, our wealth has not grown, and it seems like this falls on deaf ears. It seems that there's really nobody on a national level that's really talking about this. From the Al Sharptons all the way across the board. What do you think it would take to get them to start understanding that, or having legitimate measuring sticks so that they stop just sort of thinking that because they're up there and on TV, that somehow that's progress for Black people?
I'll say the same thing I told one host on one of the radio stations, I guess about 21 years ago, about 1900 and 99.
I told him that time, he asked the same question. I said, you don't know what it'll take to change black folks' condition? It's more pain. I know that doesn't seem like it makes any sense by my saying that to you, but we need more pain. That's it. That's the long and short of it. Because I found out a long time ago, you know, as a doctor in the medical field, one of the things that would drive a person to a doctor's office is that he can have a sore foot, a sore leg, or a sore eye, anything he wants to. But as long as he can tolerate that pain, he will not go to a medical practitioner that has any expertise and knowledge about how to resolve his problem. Yeah, he was sitting down. Well, I'll bathe in my foot tonight, and I'll put a rag on my head tomorrow. Maybe that'll be okay, and I'll take some aspirin. But once that pain becomes so acute, doctor, he can't stand the pain anymore. You know what he'll do? He'll take his butt to the doctor then. You see, in other words, that leg started where he can't walk anymore, and the legs start turning purple, and gangrene sets in. Then he'll go to the doctor. But until that leg becomes so severe and acute in the pain, he's going to continue to tolerate it. Right now, black folk are tolerating pain to the foremost, because it's still not enough pain. Even after 365 years of slavery, 150 years of semi-slavery, and another 60 years of benign neglect, black folks still need some more pain. They're not going to do it until that happens. Let me give you another thing I found out. Even in survival in the Marine Corps overseas, one of the things I learned early in trying to rehabilitate our prisoners is that people will tolerate something until the point where they say, well, I don't mind dying because I'm going to stop this pain one way or the other. Black people right now in these urban areas, they know that we're undergoing a new form of gentrification, that they're beginning to get wiped out. This new Opportunity Act that was passed about 2 or 3 years ago by Trump is now encouraging people from the major society to come into every black community in the country and to gentrify it, take it over. They're being put out of existence in space in every major city, but they sit there and tolerate it. A black person right now will sit outside on a street corner and look around him, and he can see garbage cans over here. He can see somebody throwing away beer cans here. And he can see weeds growing up behind him, as tall as he is, a raggedy fence run down. He'll sit there with his friends and talk and yak all day long. He'll tolerate those conditions. And anybody that would tolerate anything until they become accustomed to it, there's nothing you can do for them. And see, the pain is not acute enough on black folk yet. And we found that even prisoners will tolerate pain under so long as you do not, long as it can be severe, but not severe enough to make them change. We don't have enough. We don't have enough pain yet, and I found that out from watching the prisoners. They would take it. They'll take it just to get an apple. They would sell their own people out for a candy bar. And black folk do the same thing right now. They sell their own people out just to get a job in a major white corporation, because the epitome of success in the black community is not doing something for black folk. It's for appearing someplace with white folks, and they looking up and say, "There's the only black that is being successful." That is that's successful for a black person to look forward to having a job in a major white business. But you never heard of any other group, Asian, Hispanic, Arab, Muslim, anybody, saying my point of determining my accessibility or successfulness is how high I can get a job in the white corporations. Only blacks will do that. Blacks will look forward to getting a big job or a title and working with some in media, magazines, corporations, businesses, automobiles, and yet they own nothing. And that's when the pain is out there. When the pain comes, blacks will change.
Because we are not building anything for them. And we're not saying when we build it, this is for you. Because the children, although they're supposed to respect you, they need to see what it is that you're doing so that they can model. As they get older, you become a practical example. My father, my mother, and the brothers, they all built this for us. They passed this down to us. Same in the masajid. You have the boards, but you have bright children who live in the community, and they're teenagers. Sit them on the board, show them how to run a masjid, the day-to-day affairs, how to budget. They need to see how the masjid functions behind the scene. Why? Because they're growing. They need to be able to see this. In many cases, we don't do this. So what happens is two things. One, you don't teach the children anything. And then when you get old, where are the children? They're not in the masjid. And in fact, because it's not enough of you, because your children didn't stay on board, other people take over the masjid. And then the original people who started the masjid are pushed out. These are realities that has happened. And another thing that can happen when you don't build for your children, the children themselves can develop a resentment to the elders, especially if they're in a worse situation than the previous generation. And to prove this point, we're going to go into the book, Black on Black Violence, The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation, Service of White Domination. This book right here. Also by Dr. Amos Wilson. He says on page 175 of this book, Black Americans, with their very sizable population, 12 to 15% of the general American population. Now this is old statistics, but we've always been in that demographic, that percentage. And there's a reason, I'm not going to go into it, but we've always been kept at that percentage of the general American population. And relatively large consumer wealth spends only about 5 cents of each of its consumer dollars with themselves. This is another issue that Dr. Claude Anderson always points out. You spend very little money on yourself. And it doesn't stay in your neighborhood. So other communities not only are spending their money on themselves and supporting them, they're also getting your money.
New research shows the wealth gap between Black families and white families has widened since the Great Recession. And although the gap between white and Hispanic families has shrunk slightly, it is still massive. The study from Northwestern University shows that for every dollar a white family has, Black families only have 1 cent. You used Federal Reserve data about consumer finances to study changes in wealth from 2004 to 2016. Take us through some of the key findings of your study, please.
That's right. So we looked at nationally representative data for over 9,000 families, and the findings were shocking to us. And we're scholars of inequality. We've been studying this our whole careers. So everybody knows there's a big wealth gap between Black and white families, between white families and Hispanic families, but we were shocked at how big the gap was and how much it's grown just since 2004. So all families of all races and ethnicities, almost all families lost wealth during the Great Recession, but non-Hispanic white families have largely regained most of that wealth. Black families have continued to lose wealth, and Hispanic families have only slightly regained the wealth. So today, or at least in 2016, Black families at the median had a penny on the dollar to what non-Hispanic white families had for every dollar they had. And Hispanic families did only slightly better with 8 cents on the dollar.
And of course, this is all before the pandemic.
Paper gold. You see, Black folks are chumps. If America were to tell you to bring all the rocks in this country to her, and she'll give you $1 million for it, you'll do it. And the next day she'll tell you we're using rocks for currencies, chump.